Hi there, my name is Ron Rogers, and one of my faithful followers, loyal minions, or super fantastic fans, love you all, suggested I do one on famous, glamorous VIPs that I've had on my airplane as an airline pilot while I was doing that. And in 36 years, you can have quite a collection. Now, these aren't in any particular order, just kind of as they came to mind. And the funny thing was when I was kind of putting the list together, I kept remembering other people. So I'm sure there's plenty that I'm leaving off here, and I know there are. But let's get started here. All right, well, you probably have heard of a gentleman known as Louis Farrakhan. And I was flying 727 between Chicago and Washington National. We had hourly service, and by total coincidence, I had the 2 o'clock flight, and I'm walking down the jetway, and the flight attendant said to me, you know who we have on board? And we hadn't actually started planing yet, so I had no idea. I said, no, who? He says, we got Louis Farrakhan. And I go, oh, Louis Farrakhan. Let me think. Okay, I had to remember for a minute. But yeah, he was actually going to the Million Man March. So I have the distinction of taking Louis Farrakhan to the Million Man March. It was kind of interesting. He and his wife came down the jetway. They had their guy kind of carrying all their personal stuff. And those three people sat in first class. It was kind of interesting. And he had a big bodyguard that was set back in the first row of coach, which was interesting because he was the largest one in the party and he got the smallest seat. But they were sitting in one of the older 727s in the first class. The galley was right across from their seats, and that becomes important just a little bit later. So we take off and we're heading to D.C. And D.C.'s got some weather, some thunderstorms in the area, some strong winds out of the west, which come down the hills over a lot of the buildings there and cause a lot of turbulence. And we're coming down the river approach, coming down the Potomac River, where you come down, you start your last turn, I think a little bit below 800 feet. It's really cool, fun approach. And I'm flying that approach, and there was a Delta, and I forget another airline ahead of me. They encountered some wind shear, and they went around. So the two previous rivals are going around, and we're coming down. And of course, we're getting the crapola kicked out of us. Not a very good ride. And of course, I briefed. We put the full almost 20 knots of correction in for the gusts there due to the wind shear. And of course, Washington National, it's an 8,000-foot runway. It's not terribly long, especially for a 727. But and most of this wind was not headwind, which would help you out. So it was a bit challenging. And we're coming down. We're getting beaten up. And of course, I said to my crew, I said, anybody sees anything they don't like, just yell, go around, and we'll get out of here, and we'll come back and think about it later, or divert to Dulles, or whatever the plan was at the time. Well, we're coming around, and yeah, we're getting the we're getting kicked around quite a bit, but it's okay. It's all holding together. But I'm not going to chew up a lot of runway getting a real nice smooth landing here like I all the time do. You ask anybody who flew on me in the 27, and they'll tell you, especially the ones that are liars, that every single one of my landings were great. Oh, okay, but I digress. But okay, we're coming in, and so I'm going to put it on the runway. I'm not going to waste time. I need to get the airplane down. I need to get in reverse. I need to get on the brakes and not chew anything up. So we're doing okay. I touched down. Man, it was a decent touchdown. We weren't going to hydroplane, which wasn't an issue because it wasn't raining, but I touched down. But the if you know anything about the 27 galleys, there's a bunch of galleys, and way up at the top is this little galley, this little cubicle thing, and they put a lot of glass in there. Well, the latch wasn't terribly secure, and when I touched down, apparently that galley came out, and it was full of little wine glasses and stuff. It comes out, goes all the way to the floor of the galley, crashes, and I can hear Louis Farrakhan's wife, I later found out it was his wife, scream because this big thing crashed right next to her. It was her seat was right across from the galley. So that wasn't a terribly wonderful arrival for him. But anyway, I come around, and there was a lot of construction at the time, and we were going into, I think it was gate 28 if my memory serves me, but right along the perimeter of the gate was a fence. And of course, they had all these cars lined up. He wasn't going to go through the terminal. He was coming off the jetway down the stairs, and there was a car that was going to pick him up. and take him to the $1 Million Man March. Now, I didn't take all these people. I just took him and probably a few other people. Okay. But anyway, I'm looking at that and I'm going, those cars are kind of in my way. I said, okay, I need to park there, but you're going to have to get all those cars moved out of there because I don't have space. And of course, the guide man was giving me the, you're not coming in here routine. So it was pretty obvious. So they had to move all the cars. And once they did, they moved them all out of the way. I came in, they took them down the jetway. So that was my adventure of taking Louis Farrakhan to the Million Man March. Now, let me tell you about another celebrity I had. Mayor Daley. No, not this guy. This is the pre-terrorist Daley. As you know, during or slightly shortly after 9/11, everybody was concerned about security and damage and stuff like that, and no airports were destroyed except for one. One airport was destroyed. And that was Meigs Field, and it was great timing because there were a bunch of cardiologists there for a convention, and Daley comes out there and tears up the runways with a bunch of backhoes, and finally the doctors got approval to take their bonanzas off on the taxiway, which was substantial, but they needed approval, but not a good move there. It was kind of interesting. They were talking about, I was listening to a radio show, and they were talking about security cameras, and they said they're not the type that that they had on Meigs Field, where Daley had the police officers take their bright lights and shine them at the cameras to blind him. So there were some cameras that were on Meigs Field, and if you were watching, they were blinded. You couldn't see that Daley was out there with his guys in the backhoes and tearing this up. And of course, right below me is the beautiful park that, it's not beautiful park. I don't know if anybody even goes there or what, but that was going to be his wife's park. Well, what a waste of a beautiful airport, destruction of a beautiful airport. All right. Uhura, Nichelle Nichols there. Unfortunately, she recently passed away, but I'm on the 27 again, and we're going into Albany, New York, if I remember correctly. And she's coming down. Well, I'm standing in the door saying hello to everybody coming down. And of course, by this time she was a bit older and that. And I looked at her and I said, "I know you." I was having a typical senior moment, although I was extremely much younger at the time. But I said, "I know you." And she says, "I'll give you a hint. Open a hailing frequency." And I go, "Uhura," and of course that wasn't a real name, but she was just the nice, sweetest lady, and I got her to autograph a little card for gave it to my youngest son, but that was really cool. She was just one of the nicest ladies, and so, okay, we're going to Albany, and we go in there, and this was at the time where they brought the air stairs up, very small field. She's going there for a Star Trek convention, and they bring the jetway up, and of course, we're down to one engine running. I kept the number one engine running. I think that's what we kept running. And once we had ground power plugged in and we got the lights in it, they checked it and ground power is great. We killed number one engine. So I'm seeing that's good. We got good ground power. So I shut off number one engine. Of course, that's the airplane generator. And what happens more often than probably not with some of these are the old, power units that weren't that great. As soon as that power unit tries to take the load, it says, "Nah, something's wrong," and the whole airplane goes dark. And of course, this is at night. The whole airplane is dark, and I turn to my engineer and I say, "Scotty, more power." Well, I didn't realize that Nichelle Nichols was standing in the door at the time. She was in first class. The Star Trek convention people bought her a nice first class ticket, probably one of the requirements, and she was sitting right there in the first row. And I didn't realize she was in the door, and she says, "Those darn dilithium crystals, they're always giving me trouble." So we had a good laugh with that. Like I said, one of the sweetest people you'd ever meet. Andre the Giant. Okay, this is kind of cool. I'm co-pilot on the DC-10. Like I said, we're jumping around here a little bit because I was co-pilot directly to captain, never went back. Like some people, can switch around a little bit here. And we pick up Andre in Detroit on the DC-10. We fly him to Chicago, and he continues on with us to Los Angeles. But I'm looking out at the boarding area there, and I see what looks like one man with a bunch of children. Well, I realized that no, that wasn't one man with a bunch of children. That was Andre the Giant with everybody else out there in the boarding area. This guy is big. He lives up to his name in more ways than one. And he's also passed away by now. Yeah. Unfortunately, but he comes down and he comes into the cockpit and he says hello, and we have a nice little chat with him. That was kind of fun, and we ended up taking him all the way out to Los Angeles. Now we had another gentleman on board, Muhammad Ali, Cassius Clay, previously known, very well known, as you know, I'm sure, prize fighter. These guys get a lot of, anybody, I'm not a big boxing fan, but anybody who's seen these knows these guys take a terrible beating, and it takes a toll on them. And Muhammad Ali was well into his retirement. He wasn't fighting anymore. And we were taking him from Chicago out to Hutchinson, Kansas, or out to Wichita, and he had some property, I guess, up at Hutchinson, Kansas, which is right next to there. And he was with a man who was accompanying him. I don't know if I want to use the term handler or not, but Muhammad Ali was having cognitive issues for all the damage that he had taken. So he had a guy helping him, and we were talking to him, and his responses were very slow, but he was a very nice man. And this is going to be a factor in a later little thing, because I didn't quite understand the various difference in weight classifications of these prize fighters. I mean, Muhammad was huge. His hand was about the size of my head, and I'm going, boy, one hit from this guy and I'd be done for. I mean, he was a big guy. Okay, like I said, jumping around here. I'm a 777 captain. I'm flying out of Beijing, and I don't know if it's this guy or not. He was I was introduced to him as a Chinese premier, high-ranking individual in the government, and he said that we were talking a little bit, and he said Colin Powell was a very nice gentleman, and okay, that's fine. I have never met Colin Powell personally, and probably never will, but I will take his word for it. But I guess the Chinese government didn't have their own class of aircraft to take him, so he was riding in first class from Beijing, and I took him up to Chicago. Okay, here we jump back again. Ted Kennedy. I am a brand new second officer. When I got hired by United, I got sent to Cleveland, Ohio. Yes, wonderful. It's the only town that I know of that had a river catch on fire back in the time I was there. Oh, they were having they were trying to promote Cleveland, and they were having things like wonderful things that have happened in Cleveland, like they invented the stoplight and I think parking meter, and everybody's going, okay. So, and they threw baseballs off the top of the terminal tower there, and this isn't quite like the turkeys, as God is my witness, I knew turkeys can fly. They're throwing baseballs off, and it's about 130 feet in the air. And I'm going, is this a good idea? And, it was a promotion. And, yeah, I'm digressing. It was a promotion. And these baseballs came out, and the people were supposed to catch them. Well, they called it off after it had dented a few car hoods, because, these things get pretty good velocity. Dented a few car hoods, and one actually hit a guy on the forearm and broke his arm. So they decided, yeah, this isn't quite a very smart promotion. I think even Les Nessman would have seen that one. But anyway, okay, I digress. Back. Okay, I'm a brand new second officer, and I'm on reserve, and they call me up and say, hey, we got a trip for you. And I go, okay. And they said, it's a charter. And I go, okay, well, we need your social security number, some information. We got to run a security check on you. And I go, what kind of charter is this? And they said, well, it's a Ted Kennedy charter. When he was running for president, you're going to fly, it was just getting set up, you're going to fly about 4 legs. Well, Ted Kennedy had a specially equipped 727. They had a cabinet back there that the Secret Service told us you don't ask about what's in that. The first class section had a living room, a big lazy boy chair that Ted Kennedy sat in, some lamps and stuff. And it was like a nice little living room with a sofa and big lazy boy chairs and that. Then behind that was the press section, which was a whole bunch of first class seats. That went all the way back to the airplane where they had a communications set up. This is before cell phones and everything. So they had a bunch of teletypes back there, a bunch of phones. And when we would go someplace, This was all set up. We were flying to Fargo. When we would go there, they would come out, they would plug in a cord in the wheel well, and now all the phones and everything was active. So that was the communication, and it was funny. They would put air stairs up to the front and the back, and we'd drop the air stairs that were with the integral to the 727 out the back. So the press would all run out the back, come around to the front. Ted Kennedy would come out on the jetway and wave and everything like this. The press were all down there taking pictures. And when he'd leave, he'd come up the stairs, get in, he'd wave. All the press were there taking pictures. And then they'd all run around, come up the back stairs and get in. And of course, I'm doing the walk around. We have a Secret Service guy in the cockpit with us, and they have the little lapel microphones. They can, talk into their sleeve and all this stuff. So he's in the cockpit with us, watching us. And I'm doing the walk around to the airplane, being the second officer, and this guy's following me around, and we're just having a nice little chat. And then we'd go out to take the runway, and before we could take the runway, they would have a couple of their vehicles go down the length of the runway, and we went to several stops. I think we went to Las Vegas too. But they would run down the runway to make sure that, I guess, it was clear or something, and then we could go. Now, I was a duty officer in the Air Force, and, when you go flying out there on a 10,000-foot runway, it doesn't seem, when you're, traveling the speeds we are, over 100 knots in that, doesn't seem like it's, terribly long. But when you sit there in a pickup and you drive the whole darn thing, that takes quite a while, even if you're going a pretty good speed to get down the end of the runway. So we'd sit on the runway, pointing down the runway. They would run down the runway, checking it, and then they would clear, and then we could take off. All right. Well, he goes up there. He does a speech at Fargo, and I think he makes some comment about the Shah. At the time, the Shah of Iran was friendly with us. This was before he took his extended vacation, and a few unfortunate things happened. But anyway, and I think Ted Kennedy made a few comments that didn't go over well with the crowd. But anyway, okay. He has his speech, and he does all his, promotion, fundraiser, whatever. He's coming back, and it's getting kind of late, now. Of course, these things go in the evening. They go late, big party and stuff like that. And everybody gets on board, and we're flying from Fargo, South Dakota, back to Washington, D.C. We're taking them home. All right. So about halfway there. I mean, this is like midnight, 1 a.m. And the captain says to me, he says, "Why don't you go back there and see if anybody's gotten campaign buttons?" And second officer, and I'm thinking, well, they're probably all asleep back there. So I go back, and Ted Kennedy's there. He's being interviewed the entire flight. That evening, he would have a reporter come up and interview him, then another reporter come up and interview him, and this whole thing was going on. So I go by that, and I go back in to the press section. Well, they're having a big party there. There's more booze than you know what to do with, and they're just having a great party. And I asked, if we could get some campaign buttons, and they go, "Oh, sure, there's some way, the person's way in the back." So I'm working my way through the seats, everybody's standing, trying to get to the back of the aircraft. I get about halfway back there, and this lady stops me. Press lady stops me. She looks at me almost in horror. Okay, I was 29 at the time. I looked fairly young at my age at the time. And she stops me and says, "Are you the captain?" And I go, "Oh, no, ma'am. I'm the second officer." She says, "You look awfully young." And I go, "Well, I'm 29. And she says, "The captain's much older, isn't he?" I go, oh, he's much older. I think he's very close to 60. He's very old." "Oh, that's wonderful." Go back, get the campaign buttons, come in. I tell the captain about what happened. I said, so Captain, when you get off the airplane, you want to maybe hobble a little bit so this lady feels a lot better. But that was my little bit of doing a charter and interfacing with the Secret Service and all that fun stuff. Rather interesting time. I learned a lesson when you're flying. Whenever you see somebody and you think, boy, that person sure looks a lot like, well, they probably are. I'm coming down the jetway. Now, he wasn't on my flight. He was on a connecting flight. You know how the airplane comes in, the people come off, and the one crew, you kind of do the crew change where they're still on the airplane. You come down, you switch out, but the passengers are pretty much off. And at the time, they had the wheelchairs at the end. Now, of course, they clogged the jetway with the wheelchairs there at the beginning. But they were taking the people off in wheelchairs at the end. And this guy's coming out in the wheelchair, nice looking guy, and he smiles and waves, and I wave at him and say hi, and I go down, and I'm thinking, boy, that guy really looks like Burl Ives. And I go down there, and the flight attendant says, you see Burl Ives there? We just had him on our airplane. I go, oh, really? Cool. Yeah, he said, real nice guy. It's kind of interesting. I met a lot of these people, movie stars, performers, and stuff like that. Some of them don't have the personality or the persona that you see as the actors. They can be quite a interesting handful. Others are just nice as can be people. They really are. All right, jumping around again. I am a 777 captain. I'm flying internationally out of Dulles, and I guess there was a high-ranking Israeli official who had a problem with his airplane. He had a state airplane, and there was some issue with it, and it was broken, and he needed to get back home. So this was kind of a last-minute deal. They booked he and his wife and the kids in first class. I guess they had available seats, or they bought people off. I have no idea. But anyway, I'm there, and all of a sudden, a bunch of Secret Service people come down. They want to talk to me. They said, hey, we just want to let you know we have this high-ranking Israeli official on board and stuff like that. And I mean, the jetway was kind of lined with the Secret Service stuff. And then he comes down. I get to meet him and his wife and that. Very, very nice, lovely people. And they get on the flight, and we take them on their way. Now, what's interesting is, this is a picture of Susan Anton, and, glamour shots. I have all my makeup on and stuff, so this is why I look so good in these videos. I mean, if you saw me in person, I look terrible. I'm just terribly old. And actually, I met one of the people out at the local airport today. And see, the funny thing is, if you watch me, you see me, but I can't see you. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't go two-way, So one guy says, he looks at me and goes, Ron. And I go, yeah. And he goes, do you know who I am? And, he was a Facebook friend and also somebody who watches my videos. So, slightly embarrassed that, no, I don't know you right off. But then, it all cleared up once he told me his name. Okay, digressing. Back to Susan Anton. Okay, I will get people who come on my flights, and they look, and this is nothing to say against anybody, anything, because a lot of people, they want to be kind of incognito, especially if they're famous like this. So they don't come on with the beautiful dresses, the big hair, everything like that. They come on in gray sweats and much, much more casual. So, I mean, you can actually walk by some of these people and, you wouldn't have any idea who they were if you didn't really know their facial features well. And I had, I believe, Susan Anton and Ben Vereen both on. This is before his accident where he's out jogging and got hit by a car and was injured. But he's also there in kind of sweats. I mean, the deal was with pass riders on the airlines, we always had to dress up. So you could always tell who the pass riders were. They were the people that were dressed up. All the celebrities were just dressed down. They didn't dress up for flying at all. Now, another thing, and this actually, he wasn't on my flight, but I'm at the hotel, and he happened to be staying at the hotel, and I'm in line checking out of the hotel, and I'm behind this guy with his hairdo, and I'm looking at him, and I'm going, gosh, this guy looks really familiar. Who is this guy? I mean, I go, this guy looks a lot like Don King. And, of course, he checks out, turns around, I go, man, this guy really looks like Don King. Well, then I go out, and I was a 737 co-pilot, and I go out there, and Mike Tyson is standing next to a sports car with a very good-looking young lady on each arm. And Captain and I were talking, and I go, yeah, obviously, that's Mike Tyson, and that was Don King in there. And, of course, this is the different weight class that I mentioned. And I said to the captain, I said, he looks a lot smaller than I had imagined. And the captain says, "Yeah, you go up and tell them that." And I go, "No, I'm not going to tell them that because these guys are the type of people that could take you out with one blow." But I never had an article talking about my women and me. No, no, and no exclusives there. All right, moving on. All right, you probably recognize this guy, and the funny thing was, at the time, Riker from Star Trek. There's a guy sitting in first class. I'm flying from Los Angeles to London, captain on the 777, and the flight attendants say, "Hey, there's a guy back in first class, seat 1B. He's having trouble with his. He had noise canceling headsets. He's having trouble getting the batteries in, and you'd think this guy probably would have technical prowess, but they said he's having trouble getting batteries in. Could you go help him?" So I walk back there, and of course I'm looking down on the guy. He's got his head down, working on these, and I said, "Understanding you had an issue, sir? Anything I could do?" And he goes, "Yeah, I'm having trouble with these batteries." So of course I'm looking at the headsets, and I could kind of see it, and I put the batteries in, and then it works. You go, "Oh, fine, thank you," and I walked back. And the flight attendant said, "Did you see who that was?" And I go, "Well, actually not. I saw the top of his head." And they go, "That's Riker from Star Trek." So, oh, I turn around, I go back. Of course, now he's setting up. I go, "Oh my gosh!" So we had a nice little chat. He's first officer. I said, it's terrible because Picard never gives you a leg, and every meal is a crew meal. But I asked the question that anybody who ever meets Riker, of course, would immediately ask, and that is, "What's it like to work with 7 and 9?" And he goes, "Oh my gosh." She had what could even only be described as very interesting outfits, okay? Almost like they were sprayed on. And he says, "Yeah, absolutely gorgeous." Now, of course, you always have issues with dating somebody of another species, the Borg and that, and it could be, resistance is futile, and you know how women can be. And of course, there's various depictions of her costume. I'm the one up here. She's everybody else around here. Okay, so that was kind of the cool discussion. All right, you got to be a little older from this, and now I'm back at I'm a co-pilot on the 727, and there's a guy named Alexander Haig, and he had been the Secretary of State under the Reagan administration, and this had just occurred where Reagan, the assassination attempt. Actually, it was at the hotel that we stayed at in D.C., but there was an assassination attempt, and Al Haig, as it's mentioned in the papers, didn't quite understand as Secretary of State. Still didn't quite understand how the Constitution worked, and he was very quick to go in front of the cameras and say, "I'm in charge here." Okay, yeah. He was supposedly trying to settle everybody's nerves because Reagan was in serious situation, but he didn't quite understand how the Constitution worked, and the Secretary of State was not really the guy in charge. But he was on our airplane, so I mentioned to the captain, I said, "We got Al Haig on board. I don't know if you want to mention to him that he's not in charge of the airplane," but we had a little laugh with that. All right, getting to the end here of the ones I remembered right off the top. Now I'm not going to mention this guy's name. He's known for movies, and he doesn't play a puppies and kittens type of guy. No Mother Teresa, although some people say Mother Teresa wasn't has some of her dark sides too. But anyway, okay, he doesn't play saints on TV shows. But I'm in Honolulu, captain on the 777. We're going Honolulu back to Chicago, and the gate agent comes down to me and says, "Hey, we have this guy out in the lobby there, and I'm not sure I feel comfortable letting him on board." And I say, "Why?" He says, "Well, he was partying pretty hard in the night, and I'm not sure that he's really quite fit to travel." And she says, "Captain, it's up to you if you want to let him on board. I'm a little concerned about it, but it's your call." So I said, "Well, let me talk to him." I actually didn't know who it was at the time, and I go out there and I see him, and of course I'm not going to mention his name, but and they're very casually dressed. You almost wouldn't recognize him except for the face. And I just had a very nice chat with him, and he says, "Yeah, I've been partying. I'm fine. I'll sleep the entire flight. And that's essentially what he did." And we get a lot of sports people out to the islands all the time. It's interesting, and I'll take them out in the flights, and sometimes you'll see them walking around with a little entourage on Honolulu, the main Waikiki strip there, and stuff like that. So it's quite interesting. But anyway, got on, very nice flight, got into Chicago, and that was it. No issues whatsoever. So, like I said, in 36 plus years, you get a lot of different people on the flight. Most of the people I had trouble with were just normal people. The good people, the people who were celebrities and that. I really didn't have any issues with egos being causing any problems. The vast majority of them were the nicest people you ever want to meet, and even Louis Farrakhan was a very nice guy on my flight. But so that's the story of some of the interesting people I have had on my flights. There's more, and if I remember enough of them that are super interesting, I might do an add-on. But for the guy who asked, that's the story of interesting people I have had on my flights. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it interesting. And thanks for watching.